Welcome to the Mayor Minutes podcast. I'm Joanna Mouton, Mayor of Wayzata, Minnesota, and your host. Tune in each month as we get to the heart and soul of the people who serve the city and the community. Today, I want to welcome Deputy Police Chief Jamie Baker to the podcast. Jamie has been with our police department for just over 2 years and has extensive experience in many areas of law enforcement. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor, for having me on the podcast today.
Well, before we dive in, I'd like to learn a little bit about you and about your experience, both at Wayzata and before you came here.
Yeah, so I have just a little over 2 years here at Wayzata Police Department. Prior to that, I had 21 years at a metro law enforcement agency, all sorts of background. So I started out as a patrol officer there. I was a commercial patrol officer, which is a retail, busy retail area in that area. I was a background investigator, which does background investigations for new hires. And then I did 11 years as a family violence detective, which I worked both sex crimes and domestic-related incidences. And then I also was a field training officer, and I spent 2 years prior to coming here as a street supervisor, as a patrol sergeant.
That's a lot.
Yes, it is.
So you have, I'm sure, a lot of interesting stories to share with your fellow officers. And how does your experience here in Wayzata differ from the other agency that you were with?
So here, I would say that it has to do a lot more with community support. I feel supported a lot more. And the calls for service are not as, the volume isn't as high, but they still have the same type of calls for service.
Okay. So meaning generally the same type of call, or I didn't really follow how you were explaining that.
Yeah. So calls for service are anything from like a theft, or theft from motor vehicle, or motor vehicle theft, or a burglary, or something like that. That's what I consider a call for service. Mm-hmm. And so those are all the same. They're just on a smaller scale because our community is a little bit smaller.
Oh, sure.
So in my opinion, it doesn't matter what agency you work for. The calls are all the calls are all the same.
Sure. You're there to protect and serve and answer the call for those who are in need.
Correct.
Wonderful. Well, so for those that may not know very much about the department that you lead, which I should also note, not only is the deputy chief a new role, but having a woman certainly in a command role with the police department is new as well.
Correct.
So congratulations for that. That's really a proud thing, I think, for us. And certainly to have somebody with your experience and your sensitivity and the skills that you bring is a wonderful asset. So we're so very happy to have you.
Thank you.
So give us a little bit of an overview of the structure of the police department and how many officers we have.
Yes. So currently there is 16 officers. We are short one officer right now looking to hire. So if anybody is interested in law enforcement,
you heard it here.
Please reach out.
That's right.
And I'll get you set in the right path. Even if you're just a new student looking to figure out what your career path is, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with somebody about that. So right now we currently have the chief, which is Mark Schultz, myself, and then we have 3 sergeants. 2 of those sergeants are in charge of street supervision, which is the patrol division, and 1 sergeant is in charge of investigations. And we have a newly added SRO again, so we're excited to have him back.
Great.
And then we currently have a traffic officer.
Excellent. And then we also have a couple of special officers.
Yes, we have 2 special officers that were just sworn in the other day. Our canines, Loki, who is a search and rescue, and search and rescue only. And then we have Riggs, who is an apprehension and narcotics dog.
Yeah, that was a proud moment. Mm-hmm. That was fun to swear them in.
Yes.
So the physical location of the police department here at City Hall, and anything else to add to that in terms of how people should, what's the best way for people to get a hold of an officer if they need something middle of the day versus middle of the night?
So I prefer everybody to just call the non-emergency number for dispatch. To get a hold of an officer. The misnomer is that officers sit in the office all day, which is not where we want them. We want them out on the street patrolling. And so a lot of people will call in with pertinent information or time-sensitive information to the police department, and then they have to be transferred to dispatch anyway so that information can get out to the officers. The phone number for the police department is specifically for if you need police reports or like a gun permit or something like that, administrative, not to get information to officers. So for that, we prefer 911.
911, but you did mention the non-emergency number for dispatch.
Right.
Is that something that's readily available, or is the easiest? Because when I grew up, probably much like you, when 911 was a new phenomenon, it was life emergencies only. That was the only time you were allowed to pick up and call 911. Is that still true?
That is not true. The same people that answer 911 are the same people that answer the non-emergency number. They will put you on hold. Trust me. They will just put you on hold. So it's easier just to tell people to call 911 instead of the non-emergency number, because when they think of the non-emergency number, then they're calling the front desk staff with information. So.
Perfect. All right. So anytime you need to get a hold of an officer, call 911.
Yes.
But if it's more of an administrative function, then the police department number that's on our website is a good number to call.
Correct. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So when we typically think about police officers, we think about officers in a squad car. But we have a couple different modes of transportation for some of our officers. Can you talk a little bit about our bike patrol?
Yes. So our bike patrol has really taken off. It is a great program for down on Lake Street, and during crowded events, officers can get around really easy and fast, and it gets officers out of their car, and they are able to have more of community engagement. So I am pleasantly surprised at how much that has taken off and how the citizens here have gravitated towards that and really enjoy seeing it.
That's fantastic. So we have bike patrol. Water is patrolled by Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. So we have no jurisdiction over the water. We patrol within the city limits of Wayzata. And we also have a contract with Long Lake, correct? And those are our sworn officers. We do investigations. What is the role of the CSO?
The CS, yep.
The community service officer.
Yep. So his job is, and I say he because that's who we have right now. His job is to support the officers that are on patrol. So if they are out on a traffic stop and have a DWI or something like that, his job is to go there and support them as far as like towing a vehicle or also providing community service. If somebody's vehicle is stalled or they run out of gas, he will give them a ride to the gas station and help them facilitate getting gas or wait behind their car until a tow truck comes and can help them. So his job basically is to provide community service to the citizens of Wayzata and those that are visiting, give directions, and overall support the officers that are out there that need an extra hand doing their tasks.
Wonderful. But they have slightly different authority than a sworn officer.
Correct. He has no arrest authority.
Okay.
So they are not armed. They have no arrest authority. That's left up to the officers. And so if a incident happens to escalate or something like that, he's not supposed to be present or be there to handle those situations. He needs to call for another officer to assist.
Okay. Is that typically a role that someone who might be interested in becoming a sworn officer or going through the educational process and then becoming a fully licensed officer would begin their career path?
Yes. So many, many years ago, I won't say how many, that's how I started out my career path with another agency within the metro, and it was invaluable on the amount of information I learned to spearhead me into this career. You really find out if it's your niche and that if that's what you want to do, and it does put you a step ahead of everybody else as far as your training. It makes the FTO process extremely what's the word I'm looking for? Because easy isn't necessarily the word, but it does give you a leg up on other people and like the process and how to handle calls and the information that you need to gather for reports.
Sure.
It provides you also with unassigned mentors throughout the whole process. So, and even people like if you leave, like I left that agency and went to another one. They were still, to this day, I still talk to those people and have them as mentors.
That's fantastic. So we have CSO, we have a couple canines, we have an investigator, we have patrol officers, But then we also a very critical piece of the running of the department, and that's the administrative staff.
Critical is an understatement.
So tell our listeners a little bit about how the administrative staff helps support the day-to-day functioning and operations of the police department.
Yeah. So, and Chief and I always joke about how they are the ones that keep the police department afloat. So they process all of the officers' paperwork, which is a lot, and push those through to courts. I won't get into the story of how things go with court because it's a complicated nightmare, but it does work. And so they do process all the paperwork, all the citations. Right now we have started a crime analyst who will look at our crime statistics and look for patterns. Let's say we have somebody that does graffiti, which we had a couple last year, and our records tech was able to look for patterns in the type of graffiti and when they were committing the crimes, and work with the investigator to kind of pinpoint those down so we could assign officers to that certain area during that time, and work with the staff at those locations. And then it ultimately ended up in an arrest. So those crime analyst pieces, why they may seem small, are huge in working out for us.
Yeah, it's wonderful. All right, so we talked about the structure and the staffing. We've heard a lot over, we have some new elements here in town in terms of places for people to go and congregate. And part of that has led to some increased traffic and noise and certainly citizens being concerned about the rise in the number of vehicles, speeding, and noise. Can you talk a little bit about what the police department has done specifically to address those complaints?
Yes. So one of them last year, and we're going to spearhead it this year again in June, is a zero tolerance month, especially for noise. So the zero tolerance month is where officers just kind of spend all their time doing traffic, the majority of their time, not all their time, but the majority of their time doing traffic and really focusing on those problem areas that we have, not only educating, but also issuing citations regarding noise and what is going to be, quote unquote, tolerated by the citizens of Wayzata and the officers that are working the street. So that is one of the initiatives that we have going, and we're going to be doing that again this year in June.
So did we start that last year or 2 years ago?
We started that last year.
Last year. Okay. So when we started that, what would you say? I'm not going to hold you to any numbers, but how would you say that that zero tolerance month impacted what officers and citizens were seeing in terms of a reduction? Did you see a big shift in behaviors from the people who either live in town or come to town, and their driving habits and how they were maybe operating their vehicles or the type of vehicle they were choosing to operate in town?
Right. So the majority of the people that we do stop for like noise complaints, I will say they don't live in town.
Okay.
The chief and I have looked into that quite extensively. They're mostly from out of town, and a lot of them are younger or young adults. It's provided a huge education piece. It's spread on social media that we have a zero tolerance, which has been rather helpful. So it has reduced it quite a bit. Last year, I believe there was around approximately, don't quote me on this, but approximately 30 citations that was issued during that zero tolerance month for the noise, the loud exhibition driving. And so it did seem to reduce that. How do we gauge that? You don't really know, but I will tell you we ended up with less complaints from citizens. So
Sure.
I would consider that a success, and something's working.
Wonderful. And there was a special tool that got implemented around town as well to help officers with some of the problem vehicles that were in town with the flock cameras.
The flock cameras, yes.
How are those working?
So I have found them to be rather successful. We had a case, bigger case that involved not just traffic, but somebody else was committing a crime in the city, and we were able to put it out on the flock camera. So they have been beneficial as far as looking for suspects and finding suspect vehicles. regarding incidents that have happened around town, not just traffic related, but also pretty serious crimes.
You mentioned flock cameras and how they're beneficial in your police work, and that for that of the officers, and how it has been beneficial in maybe identifying people that are known to be maybe committing a crime, and coming back to town. Uh, can you talk a little bit about how the cameras work, and how they're used specifically as a tool for law enforcement?
Sure. So they don't actually identify an individual.
Okay.
I just want to make that very clear. They don't take pictures of individuals. All they do is take pictures of the front and back of a license plate or like a side of a vehicle. You cannot. I have yet to see a picture where you can see a person on the inside of it, just because the way the camera is angled,
Mm-hmm.
and then the way the camera takes the photo. I don't even think it would be clear enough to see a person. You can't even tell if there's a person in there.
Okay.
From what I've seen, obviously it's driving, so you would assume there's a person in there.
Sure.
But all you can see is a license plate and then identifying markers.
Okay.
And by that I mean a bumper sticker, or if their roof rack is a different color or something like that. But there are not any pictures that are taken of actual people.
Okay.
So the only thing that it does is it tells you that the car has been at this location at this time.
Okay.
And then if it hits the next camera, then it was at that camera location at that time. That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you who's driving the car. It doesn't tell you who owns the car. You have to do all that follow-up investigation on your own.
Okay. And so it takes, it captures an image of, we'll just say a license plate for the time being. And then how are police officers notified then that, a suspect vehicle or a vehicle in question has entered kind of this perimeter around the city?
Yeah, it can be if you you can put in a specific license plate that you're waiting to have flagged, and it'll let you know that it's back in town. Otherwise, most of them are after the fact, like crimes that have been reported after the fact. We'll go back and see if we can pinpoint the time down and see when the person was here, and maybe figure it out. Like I said, it doesn't always read the license plates correctly, so you have to be cautious of that. Okay. But it is a tool that we use. And so we don't use it very often to have it flagged if people are coming into town, unless we're looking for somebody specifically for a crime.
Right. So it's not, it has to have a very specific law enforcement purpose for a particular license plate to be flagged in the system, and an officer to be notified that the car has entered, kind of our boundaries.
Correct. And then we do not keep any or retain any of that information.
Okay.
After so many days, it's purged and we don't retain it. So we have a finite amount of time if there was a crime that was committed to obtain that info.
Sure. Okay. And that's newer technology, certainly for the city of Wayzata. Is that technology that has been around more broadly in the United States for some time in terms of license plate readers, or I'm not terribly familiar with the technology overall.
Yeah, so the flock system is relatively newer. A lot of law enforcement agencies had license plate readers, but then they had to retain the data, and it just got to be a bogged down system, and nobody really has time to dig through all of it if you really need anything. So Flock started their system, and the nice thing about that is that it's connected through. You can connect with other agencies nationwide. So if you have a homicide up here and you're looking for somebody and they went down to Atlanta, you can see if they hit on the flock camera on the way down there. So they're relatively new. We are one of the only first agencies in the metro to utilize them, and a lot of other agencies around us have now started using them, particularly in shopping mall areas or around the U of M and high density areas.
Oh, so we were kind of first to the party.
Yes.
Well, that's great. It's one thing I do appreciate about our city and its leadership, not just with the council but with staff, is its willingness to be innovative and agile and implement new technologies that maybe haven't been implemented before. Just, society and times are just evolving so quickly. That's we've got to leverage what we can to be able to do the best job that we possibly can do for our citizens. So that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the issues of traffic, which seem to be plaguing, as all communities are becoming more, people are moving out into the suburbs, spending more of their leisure time in the outer rings of the urban areas. We have received a special grant for an officer. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the grant entails and what it pays for and the responsibilities of that officer as it relates to the grant?
Yeah, so we received a grant from the Department of Transportation and Safety through the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
It's a yearly grant that you have to apply for. They go by fiscal year, so you usually start in July 1st, and it goes till June 31st.
Okay.
So the grant entails just everything traffic safety. So their main focus is DWIs, car safety, so like seatbelts and child safety seats. I throw airbags in there because those are an interesting caveat on how to drive with those. And then inattentive driving is another big thing, and speed. So those are their primary focuses. The officer, we try to assign one officer a year, but it gets to be a long time just doing traffic all year. So this year we decided to divide it up into 2 officers. And each one of those officers will spend so many months going out and just focusing on traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to report that back to the state.
Okay. And then, so we'll have 2 officers, so we'll kind of switch off back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
We had some interesting statistics. I mean, just the number of contacts that the officer had, number of traffic citations, warnings. It was really very intensive work. And it was incredibly impressive. Do you find that that level of contact changes behavior? Is it really, do you find the education component works better than the citation?
Right. Yeah. So
where
that's a
do
great
you think
question.
we find the happy middle ground to change behavior so that people, because what we want is we want people to be safe at the end of the day.
Correct.
What do you think works better, the carrot or the stick?
I think it's a combo of the two, right? So there really isn't any statistics out there on if somebody's not issued a citation and it's just kind of the traffic stop and the officers educating them. Because there isn't a nationwide or a statewide record system to say, hey, we've already stopped this person and now we're stopping them again. So there isn't really any way to track those contacts that are not citation issued. I do view it as more of a community engagement type of thing where it is probably more of a positive contact on the person's part with the officer. So it gives them a different perspective on officers from Wayzata or another agency if they just stop and have a casual conversation with them. I think almost everybody knows you're not supposed to be speeding or on your cell phone, but there are other traffic issues that do come up, lane changes, how many feet you have to have, especially with young drivers or the elderly for that matter, that they just forget or don't even know that they're violating the law.
Sure. So you brought up something which I think is an important thing because it's not really taught, at least it's been a while since I've been through a driver's ed class. I won't say how many years ago for me, but you mentioned airbags. And when I went to driving school, it was the old 10 and 2. That's not the case anymore, is it?
No, it's not.
All right. So you're going to provide this PSA announcement, public service announcement, where are hands supposed to be? And the reason for that is, should you be in an accident and your airbag deploy, you don't want to break your hands, your wrists from the airbag deploying if your hands are at 10 and 2.
Right. Yeah.
So where should your hands be on the steering wheel?
So they're supposed to be more at like a 9 and a 3.
So down
so
at
a
the
little bit
bottom.
lower.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on your mobility. But you are not supposed to have your thumbs over the steering wheel, gripping the steering wheel like this. You should have them like lined on the steering wheel. Because if the airbag blows, you're going to blow your thumbs right out. Yeah.
So something
like
this.
this. Yes, not like this.
Not like that. Okay. I'm going to have to think about that every time. So when you're not in uniform and you're not on duty and you're driving, how upset do you get when you're driving by people who are on their phone and eating a sandwich and not paying attention? Do you find that it's hard to let that the officer side of you go when you're witnessing those types of behaviors out on the road?
When I was younger, I found that it was a lot harder to let it go than I do now.
Okay.
I try very much when I'm not working just to try to put the blinders on unless it's really bad, and just do my thing and not always be a cop.
Right.
So
that's got to be hard.
Oh yeah, it's hard to turn it off for sure. Absolutely.
I mean, I know I get upset when I see people on their phone and I'm driving and they're swerving all over the road and So well, hats off to you for being able to take that head off. And
thank you.
That's great. We did ask our community, what their top safety concerns were. And they responded, and we kind of ranked them, the top 5. Can you talk a little bit about what you heard from the citizenry in terms of what they feel are the number one, the top 5 concerns, or at least let's go with the top 3.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
So the top 3. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember all the top 3. Maybe Liv can help us out with this. But the number 1 was traffic safety for sure. Absolutely. And so
driving behaviors.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is
speeding, running stop signs, not
noise,
stopping for pedestrians.
Correct. Yep. And so those, which didn't surprise me.
Right.
At all. Didn't surprise me at all. So, and it seems that the part of the particular area is Lake Street.
Sure.
It seems congested down there, which during the summertime it does get congested, with traffic, and there's just so many things going on down there, which is good. But people do get concerned about it. The interesting thing is we've done traffic studies down there, and 85% are driving under the speed limit. So the number is really low.
It is. And it's difficult, right? I mean, it's perception becomes reality after a while. And if you are walking and a car or a vehicle is really loud, or you have a lot going on about you, and all of those sensory things are happening all at once, it can be overwhelming. I feel it sometimes, and I think, my gosh, how fast is that person going? Only to look up at the dynamic speed sign and I'm like, oh, wow, I would have guessed at least 10, 15 miles faster. So we have traffic. Anything else that really jumped out and was shocking to you?
Not really. I think the other complaint was noise.
Sure.
And so that doesn't surprise me either with vehicles, and the more traffic that comes in, the more noise you're going to get. And then there's also just people noise in general, right? Yeah. So now we have restaurants that are serving people outside, and we have people using Panaway, and pretty soon the lake walk's going to be down there and the splash pad, and you get a lot of people in a small area that used to be relatively quiet, and it's going to seem a lot noisier than what it is.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a lot of it's animated. We've got children, like you said, splashing in the splash pad, and you have young people having ice cream and families out, meandering, and so it's finding that balance. It's nice though that what I've witnessed certainly is that people are coming to enjoy themselves, and but for, maybe somebody forgetting, the intended purpose of the place, the vast majority of people are really there to enjoy and have a good time and not be disruptive. So that is that to me is the shining light.
Right. Well, you
through
got to
all of this.
remember, it's a safe community, so it's safe for everybody,
Right.
from the elderly down to the littles, right?
Yeah.
To play on the splash pad. It's close to the metro area, and it's beautiful.
It is.
So, and they have great restaurants and wonderful businesses down there. So you have all the things in a compact area, and you're going to get people to come to it.
Absolutely. Anything big planned for this summer? Like any new programs or things that people should be aware of? So we have like our Public Safety Day. Is that? I don't think that's the actual name.
Showcase Wayzata now.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Showcase Wayzata. And so that's police and fire, and up at City Hall. We have Night to Unite.
Correct.
That's in August.
Yes.
Anything else?
We have the softball game.
Ooh, that's fun. I always like that.
Yep,
That
we
is
have
fun.
the softball game.
So that's Chamber of Commerce puts that on. That's Police versus Fire over at Clabridge. Do you know the date?
I don't
remember
think
that.
we've picked a date yet, but it's
Okay.
in July.
In July. Okay.
Yep.
Summers are always so packed here.
I know they are.
I know.
Busy.
Busy. All right. Who do you think's going to win this year?
Well, we are, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, the fire department won last year. We can't have that 2 years in a row.
No.
That cannot happen 2 years in a row.
We've got to keep things even.
Yeah. I think they cheated, but
I heard they had a couple ringers.
they did.
Yeah.
They did.
I know.
So
are you going to have a couple ringers of your own this year?
we're gonna have to bring it this time, right?
You're gonna
I
have
mean,
to
we can't
bring
give
it.
it 2 times in a row. That's
know.
not acceptable.
No. Yeah.
So.
Oh, I almost forgot to mention you have a new reserve officer.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So can you talk? I don't want to end our show without acknowledging our honorary reserve officer.
Yes, Mr. John Robarts.
Yes.
He's a great asset to the police department.
That's fantastic.
Everybody really enjoys spending time with him and chatting.
Oh, good. That was a pleasure.
Yes.
It was so wonderful to get to spend some time with him, to honor him and his service to the community, and his family as well. So that's fantastic. And I love the new patches
Oh, yes.
for autism awareness.
I cannot take credit for that. That is Chief Schultz.
Oh, that was wonderful.
That was all
That's
Chief
really
Schultz.
I have them both in my car. So I have the breast cancer awareness patch, and I have the autism one in my car. So I hold on to them proudly. So I see them all the time, and they remind me to keep my foot off the gas pedal.
Very good.
Well, wonderful. Let me see. So we talked about kind of the summer things. Anything else that you want to kind of share with the public in terms of, words of wisdom, things to do, things not to do?
Words of wisdom. I don't really have any. Just slow down and pay attention to your surroundings. And, maybe if you're having a bad day, just let the person go in front of you and just take a deep breath.
That goes a long way.
It does.
It goes a really long way. It's I used to get so upset about that. And then I don't know if it was after having kids. I just remember one moment thinking to myself, maybe they were going really fast and driving like that because there's something really bad at home they need to get home to.
Right.
And giving people that grace, just saying, I'm not going to get all upset because somebody may have done something that, didn't please me.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a really good advice. And kids are going to be getting out of school soon, so and they're going to be out later at night.
Right.
So slow down, keep your eyes open for the little ones out there, and
watch for them on bikes.
yes, the bikes especially.
Yes.
So
For sure.
if somebody you talked about, you're looking to hire a police officer, and you also talked about the CSO. If someone were interested in pursuing that career path or even applying to the city, where should they go? Who should they talk to?
So for where should they go? They can either go to the website, and they can either talk to Erin Eden, our HR generalist, who has been fabulous with hiring lately. Really appreciate the work and effort that she's been putting in, or they can call me directly or email me.
Wonderful. The police department administrative number.
Correct. Okay. Yes, that would be the police department administrative number. Not 911.
Not 911.
They'd probably say, Jamie, who?
That's right. Well, wonderful. School bus safety. I want to talk about that real quick before I let you go.
Sure.
There's been a lot of talk in a lot of communities about people that don't stop for school buses. And it is such a critically important thing that you must stop. Can you talk just really briefly about what are the conditions when a school bus is in front of you, you're driving, that you need to stop? And then I have another safety question for you.
Right. So anytime a school bus is in front of you and you're going the same direction and their stop arm is out, or even if they pull over, you should be stopping for that school bus. There is really
arm out or not,
especially if they're stopping in lane. I always stop because sometimes, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of moving parts in the bus. The bus driver might not have been able to hit the stop arm, and I don't want to be the one that didn't stop when I should have, and now a kid comes running from the opposite direction, and you're never going to be able to forgive yourself for that. So until you know for sure that the school bus is just pulling over to pull over, which they usually pretty much let you know, and you can figure that out, then you can carry on. But if that school bus a stop arm is out, you need to stop. There isn't a question about it.
So that's if you're behind the school bus. What if the school bus is coming at you? Are the rules different?
Yes, they are. So if it's a divided, which by divided, I mean there better be a cement barrier or cement median or something like that in the middle of it, you don't need to stop. If there isn't anything, if it's just striping, yellow lines, you must stop. You have to stop. It's the same as if you're going the same direction.
Okay.
So just very easy, simple. A divider, don't need to stop. No divider, absolutely 100% have to stop all the time.
Perfect.
And there's no stopping and then rolling through it either. We've seen that. People use it like a stop sign. That's not what it's meant for. No.
You stop until that bus starts going again.
Correct.
They've given the all clear that it's okay to go. Okay. Another thing that we hear a lot about in town also is people not stopping for pedestrians in crosswalks. What is the rule with regard to both for the pedestrian and for the person operating the motor vehicle?
So we'll start with the person operating the motor vehicle. They do not have to stop for you unless you are actually physically in the crosswalk. So if you were standing on the sidewalk, the car can go through and it's not illegal. You have to physically be out in the road. So that's what I caution pedestrians on before they just walk out in front of a car. Make sure that the car is actually stopping for you. It's a courtesy that they stop if you're not off the sidewalk. If you're still on the sidewalk or on the side of the road, they do not have to stop for you. You have to physically be out in basically the middle of traffic.
And that doesn't mean the pedestrian can just jump out in front of a vehicle. I mean, both parties need to be sensitive to the other person's safety and well-being.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So one tip that I always like to give is make sure you make eye contact with the driver.
Okay.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
Because who knows if they just stopped and they're just looking at their phone. You don't want that to happen, or they don't see you. But I always make sure I make eye contact with the driver, and I do not ever step out in front of a car because you have no idea if they're paying attention or not.
Right. They could be having a bad day at work, and they have a sick parent at home they're trying to get to and are, mentally somewhere else and don't see you. So, okay. That's a vehicle and pedestrian. One question that always comes to my mind is when we cross the loose line and people are on their bikes. Do I have to stop for the person that is crossing? It's not a pedestrian that's on their bicycle?
I guess I'm confused on your question.
Well, if I'm on the road and I'm driving my car,
Okay. I thought you
and
meant
they're
walking.
on the loose line and they're crossing my path and they have a stop sign, but they don't stop and they just keep going, am I supposed to stop for the bicycle? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to.
Right. I
Right.
get what your question is now.
But aren't they also a vehicle? I think there's some confusion there as to when it's a pedestrian versus
Correct.
someone on a bicycle.
So if the bicycle has a stop sign, they're the ones that are supposed to be stopping,
Okay.
not you.
Even if it's on a trail.
Even if it's on a trail. Yes. Okay. Yep, absolutely. So bicycles are supposed to obey all the same traffic safety laws as vehicles. And so if they have a stop sign, they're supposed to be the one that stops. Do they? Always? No, they don't.
Right.
So as a driver, I would say you need to use caution like you have been, but they are the ones that are supposed to be stopping if they have a stop sign.
Okay.
Correct.
And so as long as they're not dismounting, that was something that I'd heard before, so correct me if I'm stating this wrong. If once they dismount the bicycle and they're walking with the bicycle, then they are officially a pedestrian.
Correct.
And so we have to follow the rules of them being a pedestrian versus them being a vehicle if they're riding it.
Right.
It gets very confusing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And then they changed some rules recently because we've had a lot of issues here in town. Again, it's such a wonderful area. We have a lot of bikers. Excuse me. But the rules changed at a state level in terms of what bikes should or can or shouldn't do. Can you talk just super briefly about one of the biggest changes that we experienced with the last legislative session?
Yeah, so one of the biggest changes is that they don't have to necessarily stop for red lights if there's no traffic coming. They can just kind of continue on.
What do they call that again?
You put me on the spot, Mayor. I don't remember.
Okay. There's a special name for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I call it not stopping at a red light. That's what I call it.
Slow and go. That's what I call it. Yes. All right.
So they're allowed to continue. They're allowed to continue through, which does cause confusion, right? Because you're supposed to stop if there's cars there, but if there's no cars there, then you can continue on. So it's this back and forth. Most of the bikers that are, I would call it hardcore into it, know what the rules and regulations are. Do they always follow them? No, but just like any other traffic driver, they don't always follow the rules. So
sure. Okay. Wow. I know it's always changing.
Right.
Always.
They always
changing.
keep us on our toes. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and sometimes, even I'm definitely not an avid bike rider, but it's helpful for me to understand what to expect because their rules have changed. So, that I can be a more courteous, driver for them, and that just helps. Right. I think education's always good, no matter what the subject. Well, great. Well, I certainly am looking forward to hearing who our new officers are going to be. I have a sneaking suspicion this podcast is going to get you many applications.
I hope so.
Let's hope. But in any case, thank you. I always enjoy talking with you and certainly talking to a woman in a leadership position. And I'm so very proud of the work that our department does throughout the community and in neighboring communities as well. And, the awards and accolades that all of you are receiving, especially Officer Gurman and Loki of late. So that is really exciting. So Deputy Chief Jamie Baker, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it and give my best to the entire department.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. And I'd just like to recognize the officers because they make my job easy.
Yeah.
Yep, they do a great job.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this month's episode of the Mayor Minutes podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app so you don't miss an episode. You can listen to the latest episode and find links to available streaming platforms at wayzata.org/mayorminutes or stream the video recording on YouTube.